What's up, everybody? Welcome in to another edition of SSPN Recaps, Ethan. And it's another season ending edition of SSPN Recaps. We are finally here on the day, Ethan. All the information, everything on the floor has been done. We even got a tweet from Mamu yesterday. He said, "Thank you for everything, SA. Go Spurs, go." So I don't know if that means that he's not coming back for sure. I know we've talked about it. I definitely would be open to that. But it's that time, Ethan. The season concluded yesterday. It is officially the first day of the Spurs offseason. We do still have two games to get to, but with it being this day here in San Antonio Spurs world, what are your thoughts? How are you feeling on the first day of the offseason?
I feel good. I think this is our fourth last day of the season, Jude. If I remember correctly, we started
Mm-hmm.
at the 21-22 season. So we've yet to experience the playoffs, Jude, since the inception of SSPN. But I don't think I'm out of my mind and say this is the most hopeful I've been going into an off season for what is to come next year. I think it's very evident that the goal will be playoffs. That is the expectation. And the holes in our team, we've talked about them at length. And now we have draft prospects to analyze. We have playoffs to watch, free agency to look after. So I'm excited personally to see kind of how the Spurs front office intends to fill those gaps as we make to look for the playoffs next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't want to get too ahead of ourselves here, but do want to say the Spurs officially finished the season at 33-48. So an 11 game increase from the past two seasons,
Right.
Ethan, but obviously the majority of those wins came before the trade deadline and before Victor Wembanyama's injury and then De'Aaron Fox getting shut down. So if there weren't those injuries, I think there definitely is some potential for the Spurs to have at least five or so more wins if those guys were to have played the whole season. And that's probably a conservative thing to say. But that aside, just want to point out that there was some improvement this season, as much as the end was very disappointing. But let's get through these last final games of the year, Ethan. It started out on Friday in a blowout against Phoenix. Stephon Castle did have another solid game with 16 and 10, as well as 4 boards, a steal on efficient shooting. And yeah, that's really the main thing, other than Sandro Mamukelashvili kind of having a similar story. And of course, Julian Champagny, can't forget that one there. A solid game from him, but really not too much to take away in this one.
Yeah, that was going to be my only positive. Really, was Julian Champagny, who shot 6 of 9 from three and had a team high 23 points. But otherwise, a pretty embarrassing loss to Phoenix. I know they played Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, but Ryan Dunn having 26 points, 4 of 11 from three. Like, this is a classic Spurs defensive performance where it wasn't even the superstar players that beat us. It was the role players, and Ryan Dunn is a terrific rookie. He's a defensive specialist, though, Jude. So to allow him to go off for 26 like that, never a great sign for the Spurs. But at the end of the day, I think you can probably chalk this one up to a poor shooting night mixed with a fantastic Phoenix offensive night, um, and probably just some extent of 2 games left in the year. What are we playing for? It got off to a really bad, or actually, we got off to a good start. It was the second quarter that really bit us in the backside. But um, yeah, not too much in depth analysis for this one, Jude. Personally,
Just want to pull up these games because Ethan, we're going to talk about every game regardless because we
right?
try to be real ones here.
We tried
As
to be
as much as they, like you said, there's not too much to take away from this one. A really solid game from Stephon Castle. Significant minutes for Harrison Ingram and
right.
David Duke Jr. in this one. I hate to put it this way, but Blake Wesley, 31 minutes, a little bit of a rough game for him. Not a horrible game, but this is again a scenario where it's favorable for him,
Yeah,
and we didn't see that. I would say the same thing kind of with Malachi, but it's really the same story with Malachi. He'll come in and be a little bit of an energizer bunny rabbit, but it's just consistency throughout a game. It falls off, and then you end up with a 6 for 17 shooting night.
right. And he does deserve a little bit of praise too because he played pretty well in the last stretch here. I mean, he had very very small sample size, but better
Hmm.
than I expected. But you're right, efficiency numbers, at least in this Phoenix game, were not great.
Yeah, got to give him some sort of credit because there
Yep,
definitely were some moments late in the season. But when I look at this one, Champagny, Stefan, and Mamu, those are the things that stand out for me here.
for sure. I forget that we were literally playing the not even the B team, Jude, the C and
Yeah.
D team in this.
Well, D Book, I will go back here just to let you know. D Book did play in this one, so it wasn't D Book
No,
and
no,
Bradley
we were
Beal played.
playing our C and D team.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Very, very true. Only 15 minutes around there for Harrison and Chris Paul in that one. But the Spurs did bounce back and get a win here at home to end the season against the Toronto Raptors, Ethan. They were definitely playing, very banged up. Ochai Agbaji and Jamal Shed are guys who kind of came off the bench at the beginning of the season. Same thing with Jamison Battle and Jonathan Mogbo. But they were in the starting lineup for this one. But let's go down to the Spurs here. A really solid team performance. Obviously, the Raptors, are in the situation that I just kind of mentioned when you look at their roster. But still, kind of like you mentioned, Ethan, this was just a feel good moment to kind of get the fans a win at the end of the year. Wemby was he was in the stadium. He was getting mobbed by fans. It was definitely a feel good win to end the season. Man, I don't even really know where to start because other than really everybody played well. The only guys who you could say didn't play well are Bismack and Jordan McLaughlin, and they only played a combined 17 minutes in compared to everybody else.
Yeah, I'd even say Bismack's 14 minutes were pretty significant. I mean, he had 7 rebounds in those 14 minutes and does Bismack things with minimal play time.
Right.
But this is a competitive game. I really thought it was over at halftime. I was looking at my phone to start the third quarter, like half watching, because this is a really
Yeah.
disappointing way to end the year. But we outscored them 39-21 and 32-23 to really come back and win this game when all the momentum was in Toronto's hands. And Toronto was playing very, very, very hard. And I think it was CP at the end of the game that said Mitch challenged them at halftime. Like, is this really how you want your season to end
Hmm.
with all those fans out there watching you guys at home? And that kind of spurred them to play better. But Stefan, great game, great energy game. I really felt like this one more than the rest of the games Chris was trying to was urging him to
Hmm.
take control of ball handling duties and playmaking facilities, and he had 6 assists. He did have 4 turnovers, so it wasn't a perfect game, but I was still impressed with what Stephon did. And then KJ off the bench, he was huge, especially in that second half
Yeah.
to kind of garner that momentum. 10 of 14, only took those 4 threes because he was really attacking the rim with a lot of energy and aggressiveness. So you love to see that from him. And then Malachi Branham was 100% from the field in this game, Jude, the exact opposite of what he was in Phoenix, where he was like 6 of 17. So you got to give them credit when they play well, and you still got to break them down a little bit when they play poorly.
Yeah, bounce back game for Blake as well. Not the craziest stat sheet, but you see him filling things up, getting 2 steals, 4 assists, going perfect from the line.
Yep.
And still, as much as he's 0 for 2 from 3 in this one, not anything in comparison to the last game. So
Mhm.
good for him, good for Malachi, like you said, and another solid game from Mamu too here
Yes.
with a steal, 4 assists, 4 rebounds, 6 for 8, efficient. But the biggest thing for me, like you said, is Keldon in this one and the second half performance, and also led the team in rebounding in this one too.
Mhm. Yeah, Mamu, great point. He only had 19 minutes, 6 of 8 from the field, but I'm surprised to see that he was -4 in the plus minus because he was doing a lot of things,
Hmm.
not even just scoring, but like playmaking and creating plays off the dribble. Had a lot of tricky, pump fake stuff, footwork stuff that Mamu always does. So I think when he plays under control and confidently, that unlocks, a lot of small nuances to his game that we otherwise don't see.
I completely agree. Last thing I'll say on this one, solid games from Julian and Harrison up
Oh
there at
yeah.
the top two. Harrison getting to the line 4 times and going 100% as well.
Mm,
Stefan got to the line 5 times. One of those had to be on an and one with 9 free throws. He also went 100% from
mm,
the free throw line despite a little bit of a lower efficiency game shooting. But that's the thing you got to love about Stefan. When it's not going in, one, you see him stuffing the stat sheet with 8 boards, 6 assists, but then also getting to the line and shooting 100% when the shot isn't falling on the floor.
mhm,
Again, it's just like every game with Stefan. As much as this is this game against the Raptors, Easton, it's like if we go back a couple episodes, we have the 15, 15, and 9 game, and then you have the 17 and 14 assist game. And then
mhm.
here's just another example, although he's kind of, doing everything in this one, when he's not able to find his shot, he's able to get to the line. It's just it's just the versatility of him in his in-game adjustments as well, which again, another case for him being the rookie of the year. And obviously that's our pick. Obviously we're biased, but I think the objective pick is him as well.
Yeah, I think if you're just a stats guy and you're looking at numbers, he's clearly the rookie of the year as well. Maybe not unanimous, like I said last episode, but that's just me personally. When you look at the
Mm-hmm.
intangibles and the impact, and also when you kind of analyze who's going to be a superstar in 5 years, I think Stephon also wins that battle. And I mean, it's props to Zachary Bassache, Alexander Sarr. I mean, those guys are probably going to be stars as well. But I think people look at Steph and they think this is the next one for the Spurs. They really hit on this draft.
100%, Ethan. Any final thoughts on this Raptors game?
Shout out Julian, Harrison, and Chris Paul. All 82 games played with this one. Um,
Ooh.
I think first time since 2017 that a team's done that in the NBA. First time for the Spurs since like 2001, which I was 1 years old. So
Yeah, shout
it's
out. That Go ahead.
that was a huge accomplishment. Is all I said.
For sure. And to add to that, Julian Champagnie, the only undrafted player in NBA history with 800 points, 300 rebounds, and 90% free throw percentage
Ooh,
in a season.
that's my guy. It's sharpshooter. Bring him back. Him and Harrison in the corners, man. Bring him back.
100%. And Julian, he's on contract just
Yeah,
like Harrison.
perfect. One off the bench, one in the starting lineup.
But let's go ahead, Ethan. I'm going to pull up the roster here. We're not going to go individual yet, but I want to pull up the roster because we are about to have a discussion kind of just about the team overall. So I'm going to break this kind of down into segments. And obviously, we've been talking about this all year long, so you already know all this, but still, just to set the stage. So we have those first, let's see, probably until mid-January. When did we make the De'Aaron Fox trade?
I think at
Early
the
February?
beginning of February, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So you basically have through January. That is the team pre De'Aaron Fox. And what I will say about that, we can start there, Ethan. I think despite bringing in De'Aaron Fox and obviously all of that brings that we'll get into, the beginning of this season with just the additions of Harrison Barnes and Chris Paul, we saw significant improvements. Like we beat our win record from the past 2 years in January. You know what I mean? Like, but before the All-Star break, before De'Aaron Fox. So what are your thoughts on that point of the season and kind of the progression we saw from the team that was essentially the same that we'd been kind of seeing the past 2 years, if that makes sense?
Yeah, intangible wise, I think it was a incredible improvement from last year and previous years in terms of what Harrison and Chris Paul as veterans brought to the team with consistent shooting and a change of mindset to actually compete and win games. I think that's clear. Just watching the games, you could see that. Statistically, I think we definitely improved offensively in terms of flow, assist to turnover ratio, and actually running sets and half court sets. We talked about that at length with Chris Paul's addition. And I think you saw the impact as well with guys like Trey Jones prior to his trade. Um, However, we were still fringe to get into the play in,
Right.
right? So there were still some clear gaps in our competitive edge, especially in the West. However, still improvements, just like not where we exactly wanted to be. I think we both thought we would be 100% in the play in 9 or 10 seed. We were probably more so 11 or
Right.
12, and we ended up finishing at 13.
I think that is what you just hit on at the end there is the nail on the head. It's that we were very close. We were better than we were the past 2 seasons, but we probably were just outside of the plan instead
Yep.
of having a chance to be in, which is where you and I thought kind of we were. Now, obviously, when you add in De'Aaron Fox, that changes the conversation
Dramatically.
on a multitude of levels. But I feel like, again, I just wanted to harp on the beginning of the season because as much as there were still mistakes and there were still things, like you said, to the point, we were just outside of the play-in with that roster. Um, I think the incremental progression that we did see is significant, as
Hmm.
much as it may not seem that much because of the way that the season ended record-wise. But I think
Hmm.
even if if the season went on without a De'Aaron Fox trade, right? And we just keep the same roster that we had at the beginning of the season, I think we actually end up having a record similar to the one that we have right now.
Hmm.
obviously because some of those wins, we wouldn't have that we got with De'Aaron in the few games that we did get with him and Wemby.
Right.
But I do think there still would have been, like I said, just some sort of increase in the number of wins, like around 10 wins or so. Nothing crazy, not getting in the playoffs, but still this youth core, improving in a sense as much as Harrison and Chris Paul are, a huge aspect of that. Now, with all that out of the way, Ethan, what are your thoughts on just kind of how you look at the roster post De'Aaron Fox trade, as well as just post Wemby injury? Like, what are your thoughts on that second half of the season? I know I'm
Mhm.
kind of not being super clear in what I'm asking. Like,
No,
I'm
you're
bringing
fine.
up bringing up like a lot of different points here. But what are your thoughts on that second half of the season, and just kind of what you saw there with all of the context surrounding it?
On paper, it's perfect, right? Like you think about De'Aaron Fox, what he brings to the team as a facilitator, as a scorer, as a defender, and as a guy that pushes the pace of play. I think it fits perfectly next to Wemby and Devin and Keldon. And you think, okay, this is 100% a playoff, or this year, let's say a 100% a play-in team. Like we thought for certain that he would bring us to the ninth or 10th seed. Um, that did not happen for a multitude of reasons, including Victor's injury. However, I think there were still some things that didn't perfectly work, right? Like we talked about the fit with De'Aaron and CP. Obviously, we think that's going to be different looking at next year with or without Chris Paul. We think they won't be playing next to each other, so that will remedy that. But there were also setbacks with Devin's fit next to De'Aaron
Mm-hmm.
that we never quite saw correct itself until De'Aaron sat, and then Devin played a
Mm-hmm.
little bit better, right? And we never really saw a lineup with De'Aaron and KJ playing off of each other, so we don't know how that quite fits next to one another. So there's still some things that are unknown, and as Spurs fans, maybe we're a little more optimistic when we should be more based in reality. But I'm optimistic that those things will correct themselves looking at next season. Um, but we still have to be honest about what this, even with the small sample size, it wasn't a perfect like fit, seamless fit immediately. There were flashes. I think especially with De'Aaron and Wemby, I think their chemistry was really good right off the bat. Um, but with the small sample size, that I mean, obviously that's not a certainty. Um, but I'd like to think, Jude, that looking into next season with De'Aaron Fox and everybody else that's under contract, we are without a doubt a playing team, and I think the playoffs are within the world of possibility.
Again, I think what you hit on there at the end, there's a lot that goes into it because
Mhm.
you've got De'Aaron's injury later in the season with him
Right.
getting shut down, and obviously the games after that. But then you've got the few games that we did get with De'Aaron and Victor and the entire team. But that was also so early that they never really got time to mesh. So there's like, how
There's so
much
many
can you
layers.
how much can you take away from that? The one thing I will say, like you said, I think Wemby and De'Aaron's pick and roll chemistry, that was kind of innate. Maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it popped off the screen pretty quickly,
Yes.
is when they got on the floor together. But then again, like I said, you've got the little stretch of games with De'Aaron and the team, so it's like maybe you could take a little bit there. But then again, we talked about how his intensity wasn't really, at 100%.
Plus his
So it's
injury.
right. So it's obviously hard to evaluate the end of the season. But I think what happened when that De'Aaron Fox trade happened, and even the injuries and everything, it flipped the switch on how we're looking at the team.
Yes.
And obviously, that's an obvious thing to say when you bring in an all-star point guard in the middle of a rebuild. But still, the way, as much as we acknowledge the progression that we saw in the beginning of the season, I'm evaluating the same players in a different way after that trade happens, after the Wemby gets shut down for the season, after even De'Aaron gets shut down for the season. Um, so I think I was probably being a little bit more, me personally, was being a little bit more critical. That's how I felt as a
Mhm.
Spurs fan kind of after that trade. Now, again, I try to not go crazy. And, me and you, we try to, give credit. You know what I mean? When somebody has a good game, even if they've had a string of bad games, we'll celebrate the good game when it happens. Um, but man, I really think that's really my takeaway of the end of the season. As much as, we talked about all of the other things that we, saw in the post games, like, this group of players still wasn't able to really put it together consistently. It felt like, if Devin was going to have a good game, then Keldon was going to be off. And if Keldon was going to have a good game, then Devin was going to be off. Um,
Mhm.
we did see some shades of consistency with a lot of those guys. But again, really, when it comes to the end of the season, it was all just about, individual evaluations, because the rotations were just so non-representative of what the future was going to look like.
1,000%. And we didn't even talk about Jeremy Sohan, who was also
Right.
in and out of the lineup, and then you have the shooting struggles, ups and downs of Julian Champagny. So I think your point is well taken.
Yeah, the mindset shifted, and
Mhm,
like the mentality changed. As much as the evaluations, you couldn't take away as much. The
mhm.
way that you were looking at it was different. So that's the best way that I can describe the end of the season. But that brings us in to season player evaluations, Ethan. So let's just jump straight into it. We've been doing this for a while, so we won't try to draw this out too much because a lot of this stuff people have already said. But let's just go straight in the thick of it. Let's start with Devin Vassell.
Mm.
So we've got the total stats for the season. We've got everything that's happened this year. There's no more context and caveats, as much as we mentioned some of it. We've got everything from this season.
Yep.
And I think what I would say, Ethan, well, here, let's pull up his career stats just so we can get full context. So obviously, you have a 3-point drop off there in points. You do have a little bit of a percentage drop off in 3-point percentage. You have a 3-point percentage drop off in field goal percentage. Let's see, you did have a little bit of an increase in rebounding, about assist drop off, and steals and blocks actually increase a little bit. Um, but yeah, what's your thoughts on Devin's 2024-2025 now that we're here officially at the end?
To give it a grade, Jude, I'd have to go C plus, maybe even C flat, because I mean the numbers aren't bad, right? These aren't bad numbers, but when you compare them to last year and when you compare them to the expectations surrounding Devin Vassell as potentially the second best player next to Victor Wembanyama, then it's rough. He didn't take playmaking strides that we thought he might take. The pick and roll chemistry he had with Victor last season diminished greatly. Um, and then if you're gonna make him just a spot up shooter, a 3-and-D guy, his 3-point percentage dropped off as well. And it kind of came up towards the end of the season. He finished at, like you said, 36.8%, but that was lower than 35 for a good stretch there. Um, and then we tried to bring him in as a scorer, and then he became kind of inconsistent up and down. So when you zoom out and you look at this holistically, it was without a doubt a very disappointing season from Devin Vassell.
Yeah. I want to throw the injuries in there because I think that is a factor. But
Hmm.
I think even with the injuries, as much as it that can impact somebody coming back. Players get injured every year. All stars get injured every year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Eventually, they return to form. And I think a lot of the stuff that you touched on probably was because of fit questions. A lot of the things that him not being as comfortable just as an off ball, shooter immediately next to De'Aaron, or even at the beginning of the season, next to Chris Paul. Um, that wasn't something that, happened when we felt like that was something that was for sure going to happen after what we had seen from Devin in the past 2 seasons. But to just
Hmm.
wrap up Devin here, because we've been talking about this really kind of the last 2 months of the season, him and Keldon specifically. Um, I'm not out on Devin, and I understand there's a lot of things that happened this year, but this season made me reframe how I view Devin's ceiling. Coming into this season, we were talking about it. We felt like he could be the number two, and maybe even if he wasn't a number two, like he was for sure going to be like a number 2, 3, potential All Star guy next to Wemby with what we saw at the end of the year last year, and what we saw this year with not only just CP3 and Harrison coming in and that kind of affecting things fit wise, but also Stephon Castle's ascension. Um, Again, I view him in a different light, ceiling wise, long term. But like we've been talking about at the end of the year, it's like maybe now I'm thinking, can he be in a Manu 6-man role versus being the number two and being the Robin to Victor's Batman, as we've
Right.
talked about for years.
Yeah, I think reframing the expectation from Devin is 100% necessary, but then that also comes the conversation of his contract, because we
Right.
we paid him for one thing, but if he's going to be something else, then we have to really analyze: is it worth it? Can we get that from elsewhere? Um, but I still think, like you said, I'm not out on him. Let's give him next year. Let's see what he looks like with a fully healthy team and a full offseason next to De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah, and a full off season of chemistry, workouts, and all that stuff. Like I said, kind of when we were talking about this a couple weeks ago, I don't mean to just always move the goalpost, but genuinely, like they're still 24. You know what I mean? There's still a lot of the stuff that we talked about. Next year trade deadline. If we're still
Yeah.
having the same issues, then there's just no rebuttal at that point. Um, but yeah, I think that pretty much sums up things on Devin Vassell's season. Ethan, definitely
Mm.
not out on him, not saying that he is untalented or anything like that, but the fit as well as the long term framing is not the same. Maybe there's a chance that he can put everything together and prove us all wrong next season, but we can only go off of what we've seen.
Right on.
Let's move on to Keldon Johnson. Ethan. Obviously, these guys are probably two of the biggest hot topics when it comes to the roster moving forward and their role on it. So, as you can see, a little bit of a decline in stats, obviously, again, at 12.7 points per game, 4.8 rebounds per game, 1.6 assists, pretty much the same blocks and steals, a little bit of an increase in efficiency overall. Did take less shots, though, and then a 3-point efficiency decrease in 3-point percentage. So, this is one thing I will say. As much as the end of the season really stands out, when you look at the numbers here, and we talk about it with Keldon all the time. He does so many things that don't show up on the stat sheet, and we're going to give him credit for that. But still, this does kind of show how the beginning of the season was also a disappointment, as well, as you mentioned with Devin.
Yeah, beginning of the year was really, really rough for KJ. He was struggling to find his role in the team, playing next to, the bench unit and exactly what he was supposed to do. And that became very clear when he was forcing himself offensively. And then defensively, I think he improved, but, marginal improvement because of just who
Mm-hmm.
he is as a player. That's never going to be one of his strengths. But I do think at the end of the year, he improved probably more in my eyes than even Devin improved. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of context. No Victor, no De'Aaron, and we're not exactly winning every game. Um, but I do think that he is probably going to be more comfortable in his role next year than he was to start this season. So we have to give him credit there. And also, these stats, you may just look at them and think, they're exactly like his sophomore year numbers, but he's also averaging 24 minutes a game, whereas in his sophomore year, he had 5 more minutes and was starting a lot of those games. So I think it just took him a while to kind of find that niche. So I'm also not fully out on KJ. I know I'm a bigger fan than most people. I have his jersey over there. But I'm also willing to give him the start of next season.
It's so this one if you're going to come at me and have a conversation about this one and be on the other side of things and you're going to reference the numbers, I honestly don't have a counter argument for you. Like I
Mhm.
can feel where you're coming from if you're just saying he underplayed the contract, his production is underselling. I hear you. But I think again I also understand if somebody comes out and says, well, what you're about to say and reference that Wemby and De'Aaron weren't even playing. But I think what we saw from him at the end of the year, I know those guys weren't there, but he was playing around the guys that he's mainly going to be playing. As much as the bench will look a little bit different next year, that is the part of the rotations that it was most accurate when it comes to next season.
Right.
He just looks so comfortable, man. Like it's hard to describe, but obviously, we just brought up the 29 or the 23-9 game that he just had against the Raptors. He had multiple 20-point games. He had multiple, like we said, post All-Star break, around 15 points. Everything that we wanted Keldon to be, as much as there were, like a handful of not great games. But even some of those not great games, like we mentioned, were in wins. It was because he didn't need to impose himself as much. But like I said, everything that we want to see from Keldon in that off the bench role, not even necessarily as a six man, but just as an energy guy coming in off the bench, almost. I mean, he's not a defensive guy. I was gonna say Tony Allen. That's not accurate whatsoever on the court. I'm trying to think of a juice energy bunny rabbit. Who's a good example there, Ethan?
A juice energy bunny.
Patty Mills. I could say that. because
You could
Patty wasn't really the six man,
you could
not play
say that.
style, but just in energy that he brings. Obviously, he is not shooting threes like Patty, but that's so off in the weeds. The point I'm getting at here with Keldon, what we saw from him at the end of the season is everything we want to see from him off the bench on the actual, rotations, if that makes sense. And because it just looked so good in that stretch, it gives me hope. And maybe that's because we're too attached. But I think also, again, that the value he brings to the locker room, I think isn't talked to how much the Spurs value that probably isn't talked about enough.
100%. As a leader, he's incredibly valuable, and he's the guy they put on the microphone, dude, every single time. And I know, I mean, how much of that do you value
Right.
monetarily? Maybe not that much, but I mean, I value that as a Spurs fan. And he makes, I think, yeah, he makes 1 million more than Harrison Barnes. I know they're completely different players in different stages of their career, but statistically, they're almost the same, except one's obviously a shooter, and one gets to the paint and is a high energy guy. So I mean, it's just a matter of taste, and you need both roles to win games. So I'm fine with his contract, even more so than Devin's, because Devin makes 10 more million, and I'm pretty sure KJ's is front loaded, so it's only going to get
Exactly.
more valuable with time. Um, and if we want to reanalyze it next season in February and decide that trading him's a better route, then I'm fine with that. But I still think he deserves the start of next year.
Yeah. I'm with you there. Again, not to just always agree on everything, but these guys are they're basically the same age. They're from the same class. That's me and Ethan's timeline on them. If we're having these same fit issues next season,
Hmm.
barring some big offseason trade where they're included,
Right,
then at that point we'll be like, okay, we love these guys, but obviously, it just the on court fit just didn't work out long term.
right on.
But let's move on to some of the other guys that we can talk about. Let's talk about Chris Paul, Ethan, because this could potentially be his last game, or we could have seen him play his last
Hmm.
game in San Antonio. What are your thoughts on Chris Paul's season in San Antonio here, potentially his lone season?
I'd give him a B, maybe even a B plus. Again, expectations versus reality. Did we really think Chris Paul was going to come in and be a 15-10 guy like he was in OKC or with the Clippers? No, but to get 9-7 on 43% shooting and be the consummate professional and leader and mentor for Stephon Castle and Devin and everything like that, I think he was more than worth his 10 million contract, and I thoroughly enjoyed watching him in a Spurs uniform, and he's kind of the best point guard of my era when I started really watching the NBA. So that was a dream come true. Um, so if he wants to come back on a nice deal and come off the bench, that is the caveat I will include on that. Like we said last time, off the bench, then I am more than willing to extend that offer to him, because I think what he brings. I mean, statistically, he brings a lot for
Hmm.
sure, but it's the intangible things that you can't measure that I think make Chris Paul so invaluable.
Yeah, and I think those intangible things are a big reason that the team was able to have the improvement that it did, pre De'Aaron Fox trade. Um, so, man, what he did for Stephon's development, what he did for just all of the young guys on the team. I mean, basically everybody on the team other than Harrison Barnes. And I'm sure, those guys probably still taught each other some things along the way as well. Um, but, man, you pretty much summed it up. I wish I had more to say about Chris Paul, but I'm just so thankful for the contributions that he made to the Spurs this season. I'm so thankful for all of the sets that he was able to run, all of the sets that he taught people to run, all of those things. And as much as, maybe he didn't get to play a full season with Victor, which I'm sure was, a big part of the attraction of coming here.
Right.
The end of the season didn't go exactly the way that we thought. I still think, again, him playing in all of those 82 games, was huge for just everybody's development. And that's, again, as much as the beginning of the season, like we said, it was so different. It feels so different than the end. They were kind of similar in the sense that at the end, it was kind of Chris Paul, just teaching guys, it was about development and all that stuff. So,
He taught the team how to throw a lob to Victor, and that's all we really could ask for.
Shout out to Chris Paul. Like you said, would love to have him back. Understand if he doesn't want to come back, if he's retiring or wants to go to a contender. But if he is willing to come off the bench, he would be the absolute perfect backup point guard for the Spurs next season. But let's jump into another vet here, Ethan. Harrison Barnes, career high from three here in San Antonio, jumped up to 43.3% with that end of the year, Ethan. Man, 12.3 points, 3.8 boards, 1.7 assists. But again, 43% from the field, 50%, or excuse me, 43% from three, and 50% from the field. His most efficient season of his career this year in SA.
Dude, I love Harrison Barnes, and I think we were probably two of the only Spurs content creators that were really high on his acquisition. A lot of people thought he was kind of on his last leg, and
Mm-hmm.
Sacramento fans were kind of have fallen out of love with him. But I think he fits perfectly next to the guys, and for him to shoot 43% like that, like Sean Elliott says, he's 100% from the corner. He fits perfectly. And I mean, I really have no negatives to say about him. He's a consummate professional, just like CP.
Absolutely. Again, we're not trying to just run through these and be super short-winded, but if you guys are SSPN OGs, you've been watching these post games, you've been watching these lives, and you've been hearing our thoughts on these guys. So we don't want to repeat ourselves too much here, but again, he is just the perfect, or I say perfect. I'm not trying to sit here and say that there's not things to criticize. Like we've mentioned it. You know, if you want to harp on, some physicality things defensively, sure. But overall, for the role that Harrison is playing, he is the perfect modern 3-4 for the Spurs. And again, I've said this every episode, but I'm so happy that we have him on contract going into next season.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see what the future holds after that. But I mean, he showed that at 32, he can be the most efficient he's ever been. So, maybe he can age pretty well and be a part of the future for the Spurs. But again, we'll have to see how it all plays out. We'll talk about that a little bit more next offseason. But just really happy that we kind of got him again. Was he in
For
the De'Aaron?
nothing.
Was he in the De'Aaron Fox trade? No, he was
He
in.
was when they traded DeMar to Sacramento, they just needed to dump salary, so we just got him for literally nothing. He was basically free,
Yeah.
and he proved to be extremely valuable for us this year. And I think my favorite part of the season for Harrison was when he hit the fadeaway game winner on Golden State, which then was the catalyst for Golden State fans to post all over Twitter and TikTok him missing a bunch of game-winning shots
Oh
against Cleveland in game 7 when LeBron and them had the 3-1 comeback. And I think they were like, yeah, you miss all these, and then you're gonna hit this random one to
my.
kick them out of the playoffs and into the play-in
Oh
tournament.
my
So he
goodness.
definitely got his revenge against the Golden State fans.
Oh my goodness. I bet. I bet. You know what I just realized too, Ethan, when I asked, was he a part of the De'Aaron Fox trade? There's no way that was
We had him at
possible.
the beginning of the year. Yeah, it
I
is
was just
wild
thinking,
though.
I was thinking Kings. That's why I said that.
It is wild the fact that we have 3 Sacramento Kings on the team though, with Harrison, De'Aaron, and Jordan McLaughlin, who a lot of people overlook.
I was like, he's not even on the team. But again, I was like, who's the third one? But the first person in my head, I go Trey Lyles. I go, wait, no, that's opposite.
Yeah, we gave him away.
But shout out Jordan McLaughlin as well. I think that's the next person we should talk about.
Okay,
No.
let's
Oh,
try.
you know what? You know
We
what?
can try.
Actually, you know what? We might as well because we're going through everybody on the team here, Ethan. I probably don't need to pull up his stats page. Uh,
Two
would
and
you
one.
would you take Jordan McLaughlin as a third string point guard? Because I finally caved and got 2K so that I can simulate off-season stuff because it was
Right.
at a discount, and I saw that Jordan McLaughlin has a team option. So if 2K is correct, we actually might be able to bring him back.
Um, personally, no, not for the. I mean, if we have an extra spot, sure, I think he's fine. But I just think that I'd rather sign, um, or excuse me, draft like a point guard in the second round if we absolutely need a third string because we're thinking about getting CP. If we don't get CP, then we have Blake, and then we have a conversation about getting someone better than Jordan McLaughlin. Ideally, we don't have to go into the weeds. I'm gonna say no.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm just bringing this up because he is on the team. I would much rather bring in somebody in the draft or free agency to compete with Blake Wesley. But shout
Mhm.
out to Jordan McLaughlin. It seemed like he was very supportive and a good teammate,
Yes.
just with the circumstances that he was in. Who's the next person we want to go to? Let's go to Jeremy Sohan, Ethan.
Ooh.
Also, another person kind of with a unique season because at the beginning of the season, when he's playing next to Victor, I mean, he's getting a bunch of stat muse tweets. He's the star of the show. It feels like, other than Victor. And then obviously we have the injuries that we do. He gets thrown into a bunch of different positions that aren't his natural position. But this time it's not point guard, it's other stuff. Um, and then again, you don't really get to see him, I feel like, at his best. And then I feel like a lot of people took the way that the rest of the season went as like an indictment on him as a player. And I'm just like, man, if you're watching this and you're seeing the rotation differences, it's just obvious to me that, unfortunately, he's just put in this position and he's just doing his best. Um, I think when we saw Jeremy next to Victor Wembanyama, which is where I think he's going to play long term, or even if he's not, even if he's going to be the 4 off the bench, let me put it that way. When Jeremy Sohan played the 4 this season next to a true center, I feel like you saw a ton of progression.
I would agree. That first half of the year was fantastic for Jeremy, and that's a great point. I forgot about that. Like there was a point where he was basically averaging like 15 and 9. I'm pretty sure. I don't have the numbers in front
Let
of
me
me.
pull it up. Let's just go to the beginning of the season.
And now this is going to be wildly wrong. Uh,
No, here you go.
see, 17 and 8 in November or October.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he was going crazy. He had a 13 and 8 as well in January. It looks like. So he was making strides offensively, and I think this is his
Yeah.
best year efficiency wise. He actually jumped up 10%.
And then you
And
kind of see a fall off. Sorry.
no, you're fine. You're fine. 10% field goal percentage increase for Jeremy. About the same 3-point percentage wise, but I felt like he was getting his baskets in a more comfortable place on the court. He was showing us a lot of great things playmaking wise. I think his best rebounding year as well. Statistically, only point 0.1 better. But I remember so many games where he was just getting double digit rebounds because he
Exactly.
was next to Victor. So I think, when he got moved to the bench, coupled with Victor going out, is when we saw a different Jeremy Sohan. But I think that never took away from his defense. His defense was A1 all year long. So I'm going to give his season grade an A minus, honestly. And the only reason I thought A plus is because of that weird stretch with the injuries as well that kind of pushed him back a little bit.
Yeah, and for anybody who maybe has concerns about him injury wise, I feel like one last year, I mean, played 74 games, and then for the other two, I just feel like the context of us tanking at the end of the year is very key
Yeah.
because he got shut down in both of those years at the end of the season, so that kind of took away like 10 games. So. I mean, if you want to say he's had like a little thing here or there every season, sure, but you can say that about a lot of players in the league.
Hmm.
Um, so I haven't seen a major injury from him. I really don't have any injury concerns about Jeremy Sohan. And again, I understand if you're looking at the numbers and it looks kind of the same, you're like, what the heck? But again, I think the context is just so key for this one. And I know we've talked about how, there's less caveats and context, with De'Aaron Fox being in the picture and Victor Wembanyama being in the picture and Stephon Castle being in the picture. But Jeremy is my asterisk to that when
Hmm.
it comes to what happened to him this season, just rotationally.
Also, least minutes and least starts of his career this year.
Yeah, I think I honestly, as much as like I said, you could say that there was a statistical fall off in the latter half of the year. I honestly only have more confidence in Jeremy. And dude, look at this, dude. He's only 21. He's not even 22 yet. He's got another month. This
Mm.
guy's
Yeah,
long term. Yeah,
he's the real deal. I'm excited for what his future looks like.
1000%. I can't believe we haven't talked about this guy yet, Ethan. There's a couple guys I feel like I can't believe we haven't talked about, but
Riley
Stephon
Lennox.
Castle.
Oh, sorry.
I love it. I love it. No, the rookie of the year, Stephon Castle. We already kind of talked about him at the beginning of the episode, talking about this Raptors game. But man, what can you say about Stephon in his first season in San Antonio?
Dude, everything you wanted him to be and more. Started off the year as basically just a defensive guy. Like, did barely took any shots, and then quickly became a go-to scorer for us and playmaker. I mean, to finish the year averaging, what did he average in the last month? 19, 7 assists, 7 rebounds. And then in March, he averaged almost 20, 5 and 5. So this is a guy that's a double-double machine, one of the best rebounding guards in the league already as a rookie. Um, and it's so much upside offensively that it's like just like oozing out of him. Like the comparisons of Shea Gilgeous-Alexander look mild now, based on what he was able to do at 19 years old. So I think with all the concerns with Devin and what we thought he was going to be for Victor, Stephon is that. We don't have to worry anymore about finding it. We have it.
Yeah, 100%. I don't want to just repeat what I've said all season, but like you said, he's the second half of Area 51. Um, when you watched him this year, we talked about how we don't have a lot of takeaways from the little stretch of games that we did get with De'Aaron and Wemby. There were multiple times in that stretch where I was thinking to myself, is Stephon Castle better than De'Aaron Fox? And I'm not saying that he is. I'm just saying the fact that I had that thought in his rookie season during those games is telling to the type of player that he can be long term.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I'll say it right now. I usually don't come out on a limb and say stuff like this, Ethan. I do think he has a higher ceiling than De'Aaron Fox.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think De'Aaron Fox is really, 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 really good. And he's going to be he's a giant part of why the mindset, of how we're viewing the team has changed, like I referenced earlier, and why we think, we have the mindset going into next season that the Spurs do. So I don't say that to diminish De'Aaron Fox at all. I just say that to say that this is the worst that Stephon's going to be. And
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like the sky is the limit, man. Or not, the sky isn't even the limit. Area 51, the moon, man, or beyond.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different things, like you said, and I touched on that in the Raptors game. If he's not shooting well, he gets to the line. If he's not rebounding, he's distributing. If he's not distributing, he's rebounding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the last thing I'll say on Stephon. Physically, the way that he imposes himself, I obviously knew he was going to be a physical defender, but he's even like he's already bullying guys, like big brothering people physically as a
Mm-hmm.
rookie. So again, that potential is well long term. I mean, when you combine that strength going downhill with his decel and finesse, and we haven't even got to his shooting. I could sit here and ramble forever, but that's why long term you can't put a cap on his ceiling, and that's why we're so excited about him being that pairing next to Victor.
Here's my going out on a limb, Jude. Once De'Aaron Fox becomes the third option on this team, we're championship contenders.
Interesting. I like that. I like that. I really like that.
Because that means Steph is the second option, and that means he's reached his potential. And I also think we can talk about details in a different episode because it'll go on forever and ever.
Right.
But at 6'6", next to De'Aaron Fox, I know he wants to play point guard, and he's a great point guard, and he'll have a lot of ball handling duties going forward. But if he embraces being a shooting guard, Jude,
Mm-hmm.
who else do we know at 6'6" that embraced being a shooting guard? Uh,
Shea Gilgeous-Alexander.
I was
Or
gonna
no, no,
say
no. I'm
Kobe.
tripping. He's a point guard.
I was gonna say Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan,
Yeah.
right? The goats of that position. And I'm not saying he is that, but he has some similarities in terms of mindset, physicality, aggressiveness, and being a point shark. Like he wants to score. He's got playmaking abilities, and we've seen that. But he's a guy that I think is going to get up there in terms of scoring potential.
I think that's why I pulled up his game log here at the end of the year. You saw him really starting to get in rhythm with that, and and when defenses are having to worry about De'Aaron and Victor again, good luck with Stephon running to the rim when you
Yeah.
got to worry about those guys on the perimeter. And by the way, if you do crash with two guys, he might score over both of them,
Hmm.
score through them, or contort himself to pass out to a shooter.
He's who we wanted Jonathan Simmons to be, Jude.
He's
He's
You
the
know,
LeBron James of Jonathan Simmonses.
there's kind of there's some Manu to him at the
Oh,
rim.
there is.
I can't believe I hadn't thought about that until now. But we could talk about Stephon forever. We gotta wrap up this episode at some point, as much as we still got people to talk about. Okay, who do we want to go to next? All right, let's go to Victor Wembanyama.
Okay.
This is a very interesting discussion as well, Ethan. Obviously, we haven't talked about Vic in a while, and obviously, we only got to see 46 games out of him. And you do see, some incremental stat increases, but I think that isn't done justice because of the injury with the way that it went. Because I think if, he doesn't have the DVT, I think playing next to De'Aaron, as much as there were still some kinks to work out, I think you could see some even more increases, playing next to him if we're really pushing for the playoffs, post All-Star break.
In December, he averaged 28, 10, and 5, 4 blocks.
There you go.
Despite only playing 46 games, still finished with the most blocks in the NBA. This guy's the one, Jude. I have no concerns at all. People say, "Oh, he gets pushed around. He'll get stronger." I'm not worried. Who cares? He's still getting 28. They
Yeah.
push him around. He's gonna cross them up, break their ankles. He's still long enough to dunk despite being pushed out of the paint. Like that's this. I have no concerns, Jude. I don't want to talk too much about it because I'll start to ramble. But
You're good, brother. And there's nothing to say with Wemby, man.
exactly.
Here's what I'll say. We saw another level up despite the stats. It may not looking like that if you're just looking at the numbers, but if you watched this season, you saw another level up. And I think now that he's gonna have like a seasoned Stephon Castle who's comfortable and has gotten reps and isn't just a rookie out there for the first time, and De'Aaron Fox with the little reps that they've had, as well as an off season together. Again, it's just scary. It's just scary going into next season. Not to just sit here and be like, oh, we're Spurs fans and we're just everything's all fine and dandy, but this dude's the future. I mean, he's the future of the league, and with him having another level up, just in itself with another off season of development and his own potential,
Mm-hmm.
on top of being next to De'Aaron and Stephon and whatever else we do with the roster in the offseason. Again, dude, I think 30 points next year. I know this may sound crazy, but I think getting close to 30 points is reasonable.
Oh, 1,000%. He might be chasing the scoring title next year, Jude. I might even
Yeah.
go, to that extent because he's finally got.
He'll
I
be
mean,
an MVP candidate, like
yeah,
legitimately.
Chris Paul was a point guard, obviously, the one of the best we've ever seen. But now he's got De'Aaron Fox at the helm for a full season, and right now we don't even remember. Like he's not allowed to be in contact right now. He is
Mm-hmm.
basically being forced to work out by himself. Like I feel like his 3-point percentage next year is going to be close to 40%. It was 35 this year, 32 the year before. So he's probably going to be 38, 39 next year if I were a betting man.
I feel bad for opposing defenses.
Yeah, no, this is a nightmare matchup.
I don't know how you game plan for that. There's nothing else that you can say about Victor. Just year 3 is going to be another level up, and it's going to be by far the best version of the team he's been surrounded by, which is only going to amplify his own individual improvement.
1,000%.
I mean, just crazy to think about. Let's move on to his running mate for next season, De'Aaron Fox. Ethan, what were your thoughts on the little that we did see from De'Aaron this year in San Antonio? And also just, of course, the outlook for him moving forward.
Yeah, kind of hard to evaluate. Only 17 games with the Spurs, injured for all 17 with that hand thing. And like you said, it felt like at times he wasn't doing 110% because of that and kind of deferring to his teammates. So with the Spurs, only averaged 20 and 7 only. That's still really good.
Right.
And I think most of that was without Victor Wembanyama. But in the brief glimpse we saw with the two of them together, their chemistry looked great. They play really well off of each other. Only 27% from 3 in those 17 games, which was like sort of concerning, but obviously with the hand thing, like I'm not going to say that that's what he's going to look like next year. I think that's going to be remedied by the time the season starts next year. Um, I guess the only real concern, I guess, would be the chemistry fit next to guys like Devin and Keldon. But even that, I'm not like that overly concerned about. I just feel like I have to say it because of, that being the only real negative that I saw in that brief stretch that he was able to play with them.
Yeah, again, I think he was just kind of, like we said, he wasn't imposing himself completely because I think he was feeling things out. I think also post Wemby injury, it was kind of more about distributing and just figuring out how the other guys play rather than him, imposing himself. And
Right.
obviously, like there was a Hornets game. Man, let me just pull up the game log because I bet I can find it, where I believe we lost. Um, Here we go. I
Yeah,
guess
I see it.
yeah, it's this one. It's this close one. Where he hit the buzzer beater, but it was like just a little
Mhm.
bit late.
Yep.
But the point I'm getting at there is that he would kind of be off on the side, but for most of the game. But then in the fourth quarter, when we needed, we were trying to get a win, he turned into the real De'Aaron Fox, that we've seen in Sacramento for all these years, and what we're going to see next season. So again, that's just I don't feel like we really saw the De'Aaron Fox that we're gonna get. As much as there still were some things to take away and like positive things that we did see when he did play. But the last thing I'll say on the efficiency, because I think that's something that people could hit on again. I just feel like a lot of times the threes that he took were out of rhythm because he was figuring out our offense and like where to place himself and stuff. And if you want to
Fair
say
point.
that's an excuse, I hear you, but that's just my take on that.
No, that's a fair point.
Any final thoughts on De'Aaron?
No, sir. I think it'll be scary next year.
Just super excited to see him. Okay, we do still got people to talk about, Ethan. Okay, let's start with Malachi Branham.
Uh, this probably is one of the hardest ones to evaluate because he barely played. But I'll give him a D plus, and he would have been an F had it not been for this last couple of weeks here, where he sort of put together a couple solid games. But that isn't totally his fault because he just didn't play. But I guess that is indirectly his fault because he played himself out of the lineup last year and then early on in this season, which is how inefficient he was.
That's my biggest takeaway. I think at the beginning of the season, he got opportunities, and that was when more opportunities were available,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, and in those opportunities, his performance kind of played himself out of the rotation. I do want to give him credit for the end of the year. But yeah, I think if Malachi's on the team next year, it's as the third string too.
Agreed.
Wish him the best. Wish him the best, Malachi. Genuinely. Let's move on to his running mate, if you will, Blake Wesley.
A plus.
No criticisms. Perfect
No,
season.
no, no. I mean,
Best player ever.
he's obviously not a perfect player yet. Uh, but I do think especially if Chris Paul doesn't come back next year, I think that he's earned at least competing for that backup point guard spot next year. Defensively, just as a scrappy, competitive guy that we see every single night, never gives up on a play, always picks up his guy full court, pressures the defense, and then offensively, just one of the fastest dudes, and always helps us push the pace of play. I think for him, it's just consistency offensively. He had a couple games where he was actually lacing it from deep.
Yeah.
But that wasn't something that was consistent for the whole year, right? So we still need him to improve in that regard. But I think his turnovers have really diminished, so that's a positive for this season. I think he just needs more of a sample size and consistent role for him to really show us, like, is he a guy that we can bet on long term?
Yeah, I think at the least Blake proved that he can be a depth piece, like a
Yeah.
solid depth piece, with high value as a 22-year-old to be a third string point guard. And like you said, I think with another offseason of development, let's let him compete for that backup spot with whoever we bring in. I do think that he earned that this season. I know people might be like, well, was there really a game where Blake stood out? I hear where you're
Yeah.
coming from, but I think the bigger thing though, he didn't stand out in the sense that there wasn't a bunch of turnovers. Like he didn't make as many mistakes this season, which I think is kind of one of the reasons that you can advocate for him getting more minutes, like him being much more controlled and much more honed. And all that stuff, like you said, as much as he may not do things that are popping out a ton because his main strength is like defense and then, kind of setting up the set. And then really for the most part, otherwise kind of maybe he'll move around a little bit off the ball, but kind of otherwise he'll just be in the corner. There's not really a ton of opportunities for him to have a huge statistical impact. That's what I'm trying to get at. So I think as much as there were some duds here and there, what we saw some consistency from him, I would say, like in 2025.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that.
Like since January, definitely pretty solid play out there from Blake. He definitely didn't, like, you could put him out there and he wasn't just immediately lost, which is a big step up.
That's a massive step up for him. Yeah.
Yeah, and he does have some elite physical traits too. Like I know we're never going to say that Blake Wesley's going to be an all-star or
No,
even
no, no.
probably going to be a starting point guard, but the lateral quickness as well as the speed and the length and the athleticism, like those are traits to be a solid, backup defensive point guard or even two guard. We'll see. But I'm down to bring Blake Wesley back next year as a depth piece.
Agreed.
Okay, who else do we have here on the roster? We talked about Chris Paul. We talked about Harrison Barnes.
I think it's
We
just
talked
Mamu
about. There you go.
in terms of guys that played.
Right. Yeah. Well, we might talk about Bismack, but
Oh, right.
Mamu. What are your thoughts on him, Ethan?
I love Mamu, dude. I think he's going to be one of those guys that's a microwave every 5 games. So he's going to have 4 games of being like mid to like and then he'll have a 5th game where he's exceptional. But I also think we've yet to give him a fair shake on consistent rotational minutes, and he only gets it for the last like 20 games of the year when we're like clearly
Mm-hmm.
losing, right? So I'm all for bringing Mamu back on an affordable deal and letting him play consistent minutes as a backup 4. Like, let's stop forcing him to be a trash minutes backup 5 and just allow him to have a consistent role. And I think he'd surprise a lot of people because he does spread the floor. He has moments where he obviously is streaky from deep, but he can play make, he can put the ball on the floor, and he can get rebounds when matched up against somebody similarly height. But if he's going to be a center, then he's going to be outmatched every single time.
100%. We just want to see him play his natural position
Yeah.
because we've seen the flashes, we've seen the 30-point games, we've seen the 20-point games. The only thing that you can really criticize about Mamu is, I mean, okay, yeah, he's not the greatest defender, but we're not going to ask him to be something that he isn't on that side of the floor. But physicality. But the only reason that physicality is something that we were really harping on is because he was playing the 5. That wouldn't be
Yes.
as big of a question if he was playing the 4. So I'm with you. I understand if someone's like, I don't want to rely on Mamu for sure to consistently be our rotation backup 4. But at that point, I'm like, okay, but who's really, I mean, maybe I'm wrong and there's somebody out there who also sees the value in Mamu, but I feel like there's no reason that we shouldn't at least bring him back as the third string 4.
I think most Spurs fans would agree with you. I don't see a lot of people really crapping on Mamu in comments or on Twitter. I think for the most part, we all kind of just want to see him play his actual position for longer than just a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. But I can understand, if you're looking at the stats and you're like, I just want something more concrete,
For sure.
as a backup 4, I can hear you out there. But again, like I said, I think he's shown more than enough over the past 3 seasons to potentially get that. But like I said, even if that's not going to be the case, at least bring him back as a depth piece because that is super high value as a third stringer.
And we've seen that against Denver when when all the chips are pushed at the center of the table, Mamu's the guy you want in there. He's kryptonite for Nikola.
There you go. Exactly. He's the Georgian Jokic.
Exactly that.
All righty. One more player to talk about here. Obviously, the Spurs do have some other two-way guys on the roster, but this season, that just really wasn't as much of a factor. We will mention Riley Minix, Harrison Ingram, and David Duke Jr. Shout out to them for getting to the Western Conference Finals in the G League. But before we get to Bismack, Ethan, I forgot about, there's actually 2 more people, but this is the biggest one that we need to talk about. Julian Champagnie, somebody who was legitimately a part of the rotation, from the beginning of the year. What were your thoughts on Julian's season?
I thought he had a really positive season. I'd give him a B plus, maybe even an A minus, considering kind of what expectations were for him coming into the year. Early on, he was exceptional. I think he was averaging like close to 13 points a game, and then he tailed off in the middle of the year and kind of had a little bit of a resurgence to finish off the season. So I guess you could say negative consistency from deep,
Right.
like kind of a streaky shooter. But I think defensively, he has the ability to play with physicality along the perimeter. Obviously, he's not a perfect matchup for fours, but I mean, there are times in small ball lineups that he can play that as well. So he has some versatility, kind of a plug and play guy, right? Like we've seen him in the starting lineup,
Hmm.
we've seen him off the bench, and he's been successful in both roles. I think, he doesn't detract from the game plan. So all those things are positives. And for someone that's making as little money as he is, like I think he's absolutely a steal for the Spurs. And I had one more thing I wanted to say about him, and I'm blanking. Oh, this is a guy that I did compare to Keldon early on when Keldon was struggling. I was like, hey man, this guy is making like 90% less money and basically doing the exact same thing statistically. So at the end of the year, we can see that's not exactly the case. He averaged less points, rebounds, and assists as Keldon, and on less efficiency. But I think if you just take Julian for what he is as a 3-and-D spacer, plug and play guy, I think he had an A- season.
He truly is becoming the next Danny Green, Ethan. He's a Danny Green who can put the ball on the floor.
Right. Yeah, and I did ask Danny Green that question, and he did answer it, and he said, "I don't think he's nearly as good as me defensively." So Danny
Right.
Danny Green, he's a humble guy, but he's also, no BS. He was like, "Yeah, defensively, it's no contest."
He'll keep it real. He'll keep it real. So we're off on that, but still a solid defense out there from
For sure.
Julian. Um, and like you said, man, I mean, we're not expecting him to be a world beater or anything. Just for him in his role, he honestly started in it this year.
Yeah.
And so again, next season, if you want to come on here and say like, hey, I think we could have an upgrade maybe at the backup three, like I'll feel you, like I'll get where you're coming from, but also I saw that there. Um,
Pause.
but but with that being said, I'm still gonna also be like, man, Julian Champagny, for again, like you said, for the amount of money that he's making, and also just for the less amount of mistakes that he makes, like he's not a detriment to the team. He was mainly only a positive. And on nights that he's not shooting well, there's not a lot of things that he's doing that's really like a huge negative to the rotation. So, like I said, I understand if you think there could be an upgrade, but I also think that Julian is definitely very solid in that plug and play role, like you said.
Agreed.
Final couple guys here, Ethan. Got two more sinners to talk about. So Charles Bassey kind
Oh,
of disappeared at the end of the year. We never saw him again after it was just going to be a game time decision on an injury in like late March. I think that was kind of telling to probably his time in SA coming to an end. And I don't think it has anything to do with his play or who he is as a person. I think it all has to do just kind of with not being able to stay healthy.
yeah, I would agree with that. I think he's out with San Antonio. It doesn't help that Bismack, who's an old guy that we brought in on 10 days, averaged more points and rebounds in less minutes than my guy Charles Bassey. But regardless,
And that'll jump us straight in to Bismack Biyombo here.
Bismack,
What were your thoughts on Bismack
A
in
plus,
the
baby.
in the 28 games that we got to see him?
A plus plus. I mean, say what you will about Bismack Biyombo. My guy's literally averaged 5 and 6 his entire career. It doesn't matter if he's 20 or 32, he's getting 5 and 6. You can be damn well sure of that. Um, and I'm pretty happy with what he was able to provide for being a guy that was on 3 10 days to a standard contract. He played hard every single time he was out there. The chemistry looked good with the team. He's a high IQ player. Obviously, he's not going to make mistakes. He was just out there to be a physical body, get a couple of rebounds and a couple advantageous hook shots. I'm more than pleased with it, what he was able to do.
Here's what I'll say, man. Genuinely, I wish we had him at the beginning of the year.
Yeah,
Like, if we had him as the backup center all season, I'm not
come on
saying there
now.
wouldn't have been nights that maybe there still would have been struggles because he is 6'8", but still, like all of the main issues that our boy Zach Collins had, God bless him, like he would have fixed those issues specifically. He would have
Mm-hmm.
addressed them, and it would have made the backup rotation so much easier to watch. So with that being said, as much as he is not on contract for next season, again, same thing with Julian and Mamu, man. 100% down to bring him back as a third string five. But even if he ends up being the backup center, dude, as much as I think we could get somebody better in the draft and free agency, I am not advocating for that. I'm just saying that he does solve that issue, like at the least. So again, definitely would prefer for him to be the third string three moving forward. But what we saw from him this year, man, that is exactly what we needed off the bench.
You're preaching to the choir, my man. I'd bring Bismack back, no question. He probably has the most falls also uh, on the team this season. He falls probably every other possession, but I love it. I love it. He reminds me of the guy at the park that just like is always there, like the old guy that you're like, yeah, we need one more. Let's bring him on, and then he just kind of like dominates you for the whole game. That's Bismack.
Oh my goodness, I love it. Well, we appreciate you guys going through all of our player evals. Believe it or not, we still do have a little bit more for you because it's the off season. We're going to do one more fanspo, well not one more in general, but for today's episode, we're going to do one more topic. We're going to do an NBA mock draft here. Here we go. Where is my tool? No, I'm in post. My bad. Let me go to tools here on Fanspo. So we still got our draft up from last time, but because that was so unrealistic, we wanted to do one soon enough in this episode. And also, Ethan, it is Con Knipple. I
was right.
No, yeah, you were 100% right, and I knew I was wrong, but for whatever reason, I wanted to say Noople, but
It
it is
looks like
Knipple.
Noople. It looks like Noople.
It does look like Noople, but it is Con Knipple. So I apologize for that. We'll get that right this time. And this time, Ethan, we're going to go back to the Fanspo consensus. Shout out to No Ceilings, but we want this to be a little bit more realistic this time.
Cooper. There we go.
A. Dylan Harper. As much as it may not be in that order, this is actually pretty on par so far. Ooh. Oh, dang. I thought Trey was going to follow us for a second. Okay. So here we go, Ethan. We got Derek Queen. We got Con Knipple again. Asa Newell also on the board here for the Spurs. What are you feeling?
I still think we go Con Knipple, dude, personally.
Okay. Let me look down here. Yeah. So here's what I'll say. The only three guys out of these that I'm personally considering are Derek Queen, Con, and Asa.
Let's shake it up, though. Why don't we shake it up?
You want to shake it up just since we've been doing, because we've done Con the last two drafts, because even that last one we got him at 15. Okay, so let's shake it up. So that kind of brings the conversation to Derek Queen and Asa Newell, Ethan. What are your thoughts on those two guys?
I think in this instance, I think you're higher on Asa Newell than I am. I still really like him as a prospect, but I think Derek Queen at center is the immediate need and probably slightly more immediate impact than Asa going into next year.
You know, I will agree with that. I think offensively too, Derek can come in and have more of an impact than Asa. And I think defensively, as much as, you know, Asa might have some length and mobility things, Derek, as much as he's almost 250, he can move on the perimeter pretty well. So he's got some switchability there. He can still rebound as much as there were, you know, like we've harped on that game against Danny Wolf. You know, that was a tough game for him. Here, let me pull up his ESPN page in the background here. Let me see how many blocks that Derek Queen averaged this season, Ethan. But I'm with you. Let's go with that. But before we pick him here, I'm just going to look up his stats on the other side. So he averaged a block and a steal a game. So 2 stocks on top of 9 boards. So did have a defensive impact for Maryland this season.
There we go. Backup center addressed.
There we go. Is Con going to fall to us again?
No,
he's not. No, he's not.
Dallas loves their white shooters.
This is, I feel like this is a lot more
Danny
realistic.
Wolf went 14.
So I think he actually might be jumping up boards a little bit. Let me see where the rankings are.
People have been watching our podcast. They know, hey, Ethan from SSPN's high on him.
like you see how there's this gap between 19 and 21. I think he
Mhm.
was at 20. I think he has been moving up a little bit.
Okay.
But we do have the backup center addressed, Ethan. We've got a couple different options here. What are we thinking?
I know where your head's at, Jude. Um,
Really?
I think I do.
Okay.
I kind of like Liam McNeely here personally, and then second on my list would be Jace Richardson.
Okay. Okay.
Liam addresses the at least the shooting aspect at that wing position, right?
Let me pull this up for you. So I know I've pulled this up a lot of episodes, but if you have Liam McNeely, you can play him at the 2 or the 3, and if you want to start him at the 3, you can move Harrison Barnes to the backup 4, or
Hmm.
you can move Devin Vassell to the starting 3 and start Liam McNeely, or excuse me, bring Liam McNeely as the 2 off the bench. But this just kind of gives a little bit of rotation stuff.
Igor Demin is also a good one. I'm nervous about that one, Jude, because I don't know if drafting a non-shooting guard at this point in our rebuild would be impactful next year. Maybe in a couple years, that's like a bad pick for us. We should have taken him because he's an all-star already, but immediately it gives me some worry.
The last time that we talked about Igor Demon, your perspective on him definitely kind of made me reevaluate how I viewed him. I still think, like, I still see why he has such a high potential, but
Right.
he definitely is kind of a project where you've got to kind of mine away, if you will, kind of keep chipping away. And then a couple years down the line, it'll really all come together, for him as a player, kind of in that like Giannis esque mold. Again, not saying he's going to be Giannis, but it'll take a little bit for him to really be complete as a player. So for me here, and I think you actually were right. I thought you were going to say that I was going with Igor, but I think Jace Richardson,
Hmm.
that's the one that stands out to me the most here. I definitely there's a little bit of me that wants to go Nolan
I
Traore,
was gonna
just
say that as well.
just because of the French connection, and they're ranked right next to each other. But just what Jace Richardson did in the Big Ten at Michigan State, like that's
Right.
just, as much as there's a ton of good guys coming from France right now, I just feel like Jace Richardson is a little bit more of a sure thing. But if we want to switch it up because we've drafted Jace Richardson in other mocks, I'm totally down to go with Nolan Traore. Like it's like it's a very minuscule difference for me between those two guys. They're ranked basically the same.
I think we go Jace. I think
Okay,
just
I'm
it,
with you.
it solves the bench scoring, ball dominant guy. Like this immediately is an improvement.
So with that, well, here, let's wait until the end. We'll finish the draft and then I'll pull up the rotations again. So that's the second time that we've picked Jace Richardson at that 15-16 spot. So maybe that's something to watch this summer. Obviously, there's a ton of stuff that could happen in between then that could affect that, but that is a trend kind of that I've noticed here, Ethan. I didn't think he was going to be there the first time that happened, but now as we've kind of gone on in the draft process, I do think that would be a realistic pick. So you got somebody for Blake to compete with in the backup point guard position, and then we've got Derek Queen as the backup center. So that really kind of leaves that backup 4 position as the main opening here with this last pick,
Hmm. Which pick do we have? I forget. 30,
39.
39. Okay. All right. We're watching. We're watching.
I definitely think that the the fanspo consensus is a
Oh, dang
is a
it.
is a better big board.
I keep hoping that one of these days JT Toppin drops to us at our pick.
Uh
I
huh.
really do like JT Toppin. Hmm.
Yeah, Yaxel Lindeborg, just to say, he's going to be playing at Michigan next year. I've been watching more of him. I definitely think, I see why a lot of people were saying that they would like him as the backup center, as much as he's only 6'9", Ethan. Just he's a double-double, rebounding, machine, Jared Vanderbilt kind of type build, but probably can't, plays a little bit more around the rim. So I see why people were very high on him in the second round, but obviously, one, the backup center position's already been addressed, and two, he's going to be playing at Michigan next year. But I
Hmm.
see Walter Clayton is here. The only thing is we just drafted Jace Richardson.
I think Dink Pate's a pretty solid pick here. I also like Isaiah Evans too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Dink Pate, I think, could be our project guy in kind of a similar fashion that Igor Demon would be, or Demon. Um,
Mm-hmm.
real versatile
I
18-year
agree.
old, high upside defensively, athletic. and it can take him a couple years, but I mean he'll be a second round pick anyway, so we have that investment time.
And here's the other thing that I forget about. There's only so many roster spots, so there's a big chance that this last second round pick could be a two-way guy as well.
Right.
And that's kind of what Dink Pate's been doing. He played with G League Ignite and then he played with Mexico City this season. So that would be an easy transition, going from Mexico City to Austin and
Right.
kind of spending a year in the G League, like you said, to maybe develop into something long term. But I'm with you here because they're listing him as a forward, and I think that kind of is how his game is molded. But like you said, when he first came into G League Ignite, he was supposed to kind of be one of those, 6'8" point guards, the positionless, type of, high end prospect that he was projected to be in this draft that he didn't end up being, that we've talked about in other episodes. Not to repeat myself too much. But for those of you guys who don't know, y'all can go look that up about Dink Pate. But I think he's got the highest value, with him once upon a time being a super high prospect whenever it comes to rankings. And also he's got positional versatility as well.
Right on.
So let's roll with that. He definitely would probably spend the year in Austin. But with all that being said, Ethan, that would kind of make this bottom row here. And if you're listening on podcast, we apologize, but we've got our graphic up of our roster outlook for next season. You'd have Jace Richardson in that point guard position. You'd have Derek Queen in the backup center position. And then again, I can't believe I'm forgetting this. And then we'd have Dink Pate somewhere in one of these forward positions. Maybe you could move up Keldon and move Harrison to the 4. And then you can have Dink as the backup 3. But also if Malachi Branham gets moved, he could kind of be in that third string 2 position. Regardless, he's going to be in one of those third string positions if he's not in a two-way spot. But that's kind of where he would fit in potentially there.
I think that's a nice draft, Jude. I think we have some immediate impact guys, and we fill a couple of needs, and then we still maintain our project player for you to be obsessed with in Austin.
There we go, completely. And one I can actually be invested in.
Exactly.
Unlike last season. But here's what I'll say about this one. Definitely a lot more realistic in this one. And I think like this genuinely could be, something that happens for the Spurs.
Right on. I agree.
Okay. Last thing, Ethan, just for fun, because tomorrow is the start of the playoffs, we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of a bracket challenge here, Ethan. Okay. So we can start off with the play-in because we're not able to do that here on ESPN. So let me go ahead and pull that up. So we've got Orlando and Atlanta. Who do you got in that one?
Orlando.
Okay, I got Orlando too. Chicago and Miami.
Chicago.
I got Chicago too. Now that leads to the final play-in game, which would be Atlanta versus Chicago.
I think Chicago.
Okay, I'm gonna go with Atlanta, but we hear that, so that's our first difference there. I'm gonna say Atlanta gets in. Ethan's gonna say Chicago gets in. Let's move to the.
For a second. Sorry, I gotta pee really bad.
No, go for it. You're good. Right, you're good. You are good. Alrighty, so we're back, guys. We'll move on to the West play-in here, Ethan. We got Golden State and Memphis in the 7-8 game.
Golden State.
I went with Golden State as well. Then we got Sacramento and Dallas in the 9-10 game.
Sacramento.
I went with Sacramento as well. That leads to, or go ahead.
Actually, give me Dallas.
Okay, you're going to go with Dallas. I got Sacramento in that one, so that's another difference we have.
Okay.
Memphis and Sacramento in the 8 seed game.
Memphis.
That's what I went to as well. So there we go. We got the play-in on both sides for you guys there, but let's go ahead and just go with the bracket here, Ethan. So I'm assuming we're probably going to take the Thunder over the people that we have in the 8 seed. All right. What will you say about that game-wise? Like, how many games will that be in?
4 games.
I'll say 5.
Gentlemen's sweep.
Nuggets and Clippers. Who you got?
Man, this one's tough because of the injury factor. Man, I'm going to go Clippers.
I'm with you, dude. I'm not just agreeing with you. I've made my own predictions already because I've been excited for the playoffs. And I didn't think I was going to, like, looking at this bracket, I wouldn't have thought that I would have picked the Clippers, but when I really look at that matchup and like you said, the
Mhm.
injury factor, as well as the way Kawhi and Harden have been looking, man,
Dude.
I'm going with the Clippers too. And I do think obviously that'll be a 6-7 game series for sure.
Yeah, I'd go 7 games. That's gonna bite me in the butt, though. Every year I pick the Clippers in the first round, and Kawhi gets hurt in, like, game 3.
Kawhi sits out and then it's all
Yeah, it's
for
all
naught.
over.
It's the battered Spurs fan in us from 2017.
It is.
All right, Lakers and T-Wolves.
Man, Lakers.
Me too. Rockets and Golden State for us.
Ooh, dude, that's a good series. Ooh.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Ooh. This is not me being a hater, but I think Golden State wins that
Dude,
one.
they're gonna hate us so much, but
Yeah.
that's what I went with too. Again, another 6-7 game series. I think the Rockets long term 100% gonna be championship contenders. This is just, and also you got to factor in Jimmy Butler wasn't on the team the whole year. That would have
Yeah.
made Golden State have a better record, at least in my opinion. So I think this is kind of where, the Rockets, they have their veteran lesson and then long next year, they'll start winning series. It's not just us crapping on the Rockets. It's just, I think the experience factor is going to be huge here and playoff Jimmy and Steph.
Dude, Draymond versus Dylan Brooks is gonna be a movie. I can't wait for that.
Oh my goodness. You're right. All right. Let's go to the East. We got the Cavs in round one, I'm sure.
Yeah.
How many games for you?
4.
I'll go with 5 again. Just to
Yeah.
have some variation. Alrighty. Then we got Bucks and Pacers, man. Another crazy
That's a
4-5 series.
wild one. I think I'm gonna have to go Bucks. But I think it'll be close. I think it'll be 6 games. I I know they've been playing like pretty bad, but you can't write off Giannis, and I just don't think the Pacers have the defense that is necessary to stop him.
I think he, with the tear that he's been on recently, like, and we've seen what the Pacers have done in previous years in the
Yeah.
playoffs. Like, I'm not trying to discount that. These 4-5 series are just so tough. But I'm with you again, not to just disagree with you, but I have the same level of thought. I just think Giannis is going to be the best player,
Mhm.
and that's going to be the factor, as well as Dame and the other guys that they have on the team, of course. But I think that's what's going to get them over the top against Indiana.
This next series is actually my favorite series of the entire first round.
Interesting. Okay, who you got then?
I'm gonna go Knicks, but I think it's only gonna go to 6 games. But I think it'll be real fun because the Detroit Pistons are on their way up. I just don't think they have the size necessary to match up with Cat. I think he's gonna have himself a field day. But Cade Cunningham's the real deal, and they're a real physical, throwback to the '80s Pistons. So that'll be a fun matchup.
It's interesting you mentioned the size thing because when I looked at that, the first thing I thought was, okay, Jalen Duren versus Cat. Because obviously Cat
Yeah,
is going to, and not saying that when I say that, I'm not insinuating one side or the other. I'm just saying like
I hear you.
that's going to be a key matchup because if, Jalen Duren can just be physical with him and make a few stops here and there, that could be the difference for keeping some games competitive because,
We'll
you know,
see, man.
that is a huge factor. That is a fun series. Just the Pistons ascension as well as like the depth that you wouldn't think that they have, like with Asar Thompson and then Malik Beasley is one of those other guys across the league that one of the 4 people
Mhm.
in the league to have at least 800 points off the bench this season. So
Yep.
anyways, lots of storylines in that one. I do see where you're coming from, but I'm with you there. I'm going to go with the Knicks too. And I'm sure we're both going with Boston here too.
Yeah, Boston.
Alrighty. Now we got the conference semis. We'll go back to the West, Ethan. Thunder and Clippers.
Thunder.
Yeah, me too. 6 games probably, but Thunder, they're just too deep, man.
Yeah.
They got too much depth. All right. Lakers and Golden State. I know, dude.
Lakers.
Me too. That another 7-game series, man. Like
Yeah.
that one, especially with Jimmy, but it's just when you have Luka and LeBron, it's so hard to pick against that. But let's go over to the East here. Bucks and Cavs.
Cavs.
I'm with you too. I'm definitely that one. I think that could be a 7-game series as well. I know I'm saying that about like every series, but this one here, I'm very. That one was hard for me to pick. I'm very torn on it because obviously the Cavs have done what they've done this season, and I don't want to diminish that, but also I could see a world where Giannis is the best player on the floor. But still, I think the depth that the Cavs have makes me want to go with them too. And then I'm going to go with the Celtics here against the Knicks.
Yeah, I think the Celtics are going to win, but that's a shame. I hope the Knicks push them to at least 7 games because they're a really good team too. But the Celtics fully healthy are just so deep.
It's hard to pick against the Celtics in general right now. They're literally in the middle of their dynasty. I know they've only won one, but like regardless, they're going to be a contender for like the next 6 years at least,
For
probably.
sure.
So that brings us to the Western Conference Finals, Ethan. We've got the Thunder and the Lakers in the West.
Thunder.
I'm with you here too.
Unfortunately, it'll be 5 games, I think.
Okay, I'll push back there. I think it's going to be more than that. I've seen other people saying that too, and y'all might just be a little bit more uh, NBA aware than me on that. But I think that Luka and LeBron can definitely push this to at least 6 games. But still, I think the way that this Thunder team is built and the way that they're playing together and the amount of years that they've had together and the fact that all of them, for the most part, have only played with each other, it just feels like this is their ascension year finally that Sam Presti has been building for like 6 years. So,
Yeah, I think Lakers would win if they had a good center. Not even a great one,
yeah.
just a good center. But they have Jackson Hayes, so I just don't think they have the size.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing that I forgot about as well, because they got to deal with not just Chet. And as much as maybe you might be able to do some things physically with Chet, you've still got Isaiah Hartenstein on that team. So it's just,
Hmm.
that's a problem.
Right.
Cavs and Celtics, who you got?
I'm gonna go Celtics in a really tough 7-game series.
I'm with the Celtics too. I'll say that it's in 6.
Hmm.
I'll actually say that I don't think it gets to 7. I think it's 6 or less. That's what
Hmm.
I'll say to differ a little bit. Um, but this was honestly in my own predictions, Ethan. This is what I had. I had the Thunder and the Celtics. I went with the Thunder in this one, but I mean, it's the only reason I'm doing that is just because it feels like this is their year. Like there's something brewing in the water with everything
Hmm.
going right for them the way it has. But I would not be surprised to see a Celtics back to back either because they're just so experienced. And
Yeah.
they actually can match up with the Thunder's depth too.
Yeah, just to play devil's advocate, I'll go Celtics. I think it'll be a really, really good
Okay.
series. And just to put a spin, a little narrative on it, I think Shea struggles in his first finals appearance. The rest of the team doesn't. That's going to be my narrative spin because of the perimeter
No, I hear
defense that the
you.
Celtics
I
can
hear
throw at him.
you 1000%. And I don't think that he's had to face
No foul
something like
calls
that.
either.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, so because we do have to make this the same, Ethan, we'll go ahead and make the SSPN bracket champion
Mm,
uh the Celtics here. And we do have to throw this in, so I'm just going to throw in a number here. 395. Who's the finals MVP going to be, Ethan? It was Jalen.
Jason Tatum.
It was Jalen last year, right?
It was, and I think that the NBA has to give it to Tatum now. I think they just have to.
If he has a good series, yeah, it's probably going to happen. I'm going to go out on a limb, Ethan. I'm going to say Derek White. Let's go.
Hey man, if he locks up Shea, if he keeps Shea
That's
to
what I'm saying.
20 or less, then yeah, he's got himself an Andre Iguodala type Finals MVP.
We appreciate all of you guys hanging out with us for an hour and a half today. We won't be seeing you guys as much, and probably the episodes may not be as long as this one, but we had a ton of stuff to get into. Wanted to give you guys the playoff predictions as well as a mock draft every time that we're on here now, kind of until draft season ends. So again, we appreciate you guys. We'll catch y'all in the next one. And if you enjoyed the content, hit that like and that subscribe button below. Follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. We appreciate y'all. Go Spurs, go. See y'all later.